So we have a guest speaker who's going to give a short 5-minute presentation. Her name is Kaelan and she is an advisor for the Games for Learning Institute, and she's going to speak for 5 minutes about gamer immersion. So, welcome.
Hey everybody. So I'm Kaelan. I'm an advisor for the Games for Learning Institute, and we're trying to figure out basically, in a nutshell, what kinds of games help kids in middle school learn. And I'm a freshman in my high school year, so I'm sort of coming to you guys to talk about our perspective as kids. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about how kids learn, and they've talked to kids, but I am a kid, so yeah. So in terms of games, the best way to make kids learn, I've talked to all my friends about this, it's immersion. Even in games that aren't digital, the best ones where the kids have the most fun is when you're really, really immersed in a game and really you forget that the real world exists. And it's sort of a difficult juxtaposition with the real world, which we're trying to impact via games, and the game world, which kids use to lose themselves in. So there are two basic ways to immerse a kid, and we'll get a bit later to like, once you immerse them, what do you do then? And those are characterization and narrative structure. And characterization is when you use the character so that the person can go into it, and then once you're inside the character and once you're inside the character's head and you believe they're that person, then you're in the world. And that's when you're totally immersed. And the other way is through narrative structure, so through a story and a really beautiful plot, like how we do in movies. Through that, you give them purpose in this world and give them a reason to be there and a why and a how, and then through that, that's how you immerse them. So really, you need like a balance. And if you go too much into immersing the person through their character, the story's too vague and the characters aren't developed enough, and so the person doesn't feel like the world is real enough. But when the story is too developed, you don't feel like you can get into it. So there really needs to be a balance. And I also find that boys, I hate to make generalizations about boys and girls, but I find that guys tend to be more on the side of putting themselves in through a character, and girls feel more interested in story. Like, I use the example of Legend of Zelda and Final Fantasy, and in Final Fantasy, which a lot of girls really like, it's the story is very engaging and the characters are really well developed and you feel an emotional connection. And with The Legend of Zelda, Link, the main character, he's a really, really blank character. Like, he understands emotion, he has emotion, but besides that, he doesn't have too much of a personality. So the gamer can easily sort of put themselves in. So why learning games don't work from our perspective. I find that when a game is given the idea of this is so you can learn, or you're learning this in the real world, it takes you out of the world of the game, because suddenly you're not the character anymore, you're the person, you're a kid again. And that sort of makes things difficult, because when you're only half in the world, you aren't as connected, you aren't as engaged, and when you're not as engaged, you're not listening as much. So some exceptions to the rule, I guess, are Bioshock and Brain Age. Brain Age being that it's you who's having the objectives, and Bioshock meaning that the character himself, I believe, is faceless and makes decisions about the story that affect the story really directly. So what about once you're in the world, once you've got somebody hooked, and once you have these kids listening to what you're trying to say? What I think would work the best in terms of trying to get people to make an impact and trying to get people to listen to what you're trying to say is not to make it like an Aesop, which is like when you like drop this huge thing on them and say, well, this has this connotation in the real world. I think that you should give them the decisions and give them the power to affect that world. And then they'll make the connection between the world of the game and the real world on their own. I don't believe that that's something you can make a connection to, because we're actually really smart, and we can actually really make the connections ourselves. And once we have that connection, and once we have that understanding, then you can leave it up to us and we'll make the changes. Thanks.